I think the NBA would certainly agree with you that dynasties equal ratings. Like the Golden State Warriors dynasty drew huge ratings when they were in the finals. The Heat, such a polarizing team early on, but they drew huge ratings. Remember ESPN, started that Heat index down there, sent a whole troop of reporters with Brian Windhorst and others to cover the Heat during those years. The NBA would agree with that, but they believe that it's better for the long-term health of the NBA for them to have an NFL type model where a different team gets a chance at a championship every single year. I mean, this is something that really began under David Stern. Like David Stern had these dreams in the early 2000s of becoming an NFL type of league. And every collective bargaining agreement they've done from, 2011 to 2016 to the most recent one has been building towards that, trying to make it so that talent can't cluster in one spot whenever they want to, trying to make it difficult to do trades, trying to make it so the teams that build their rosters out organically, like in Oklahoma City or Denver, have great chances to win championships. So the NBA, I think, is willing to take the pain of having lower ratings in, say, the NBA Finals in order to have competitive games during the regular season and certainly in the early rounds of the playoffs. On the style of play, I think that's a real issue. That's something I wrote about in the magazine coming out in a few weeks. The NBA's got a three-point problem, in my opinion. These games are turning into three-point shooting contests every single night. Now, Boston has kind of cracked the code here. They play like 7 or 8 guys that all shoot threes in high volumes and all shoot with high accuracy. They're going to break the all-time record for three-point attempts per game, by probably 4 or 5 when it's all said and done. They're probably going to average more than 50 per game. There's like 6 or 7 teams out there that are going to average more than 40 per game. And that's a trend, Andrew, that is only going to continue. Because like I mentioned earlier in the show, Oklahoma City, built out its team kind of like Boston. A lot of three-point shooting, wing type of players. Every team in the league is going to try to do that. So you're only going to see these three-point numbers go up. And I don't think that there's as broad a fan base for a three-point shooting contest as the NBA wants. Some of these young guys, young kids, they love watching the threes. They love Steph Curry. They love these three-point shootouts. But to your point earlier, a lot of them are watching them on clips. They're not sitting down and watching full games. The people that do sit down and watch full games, they don't want to watch this. Like, they don't want to watch, 53s from one team, 45 for the next team. They want something a little bit more old school. So I think the biggest challenge for the NBA is tweaking its system, whether it's a defensive rule change. I don't think they'll experiment with the three-point line, but that's something they could consider as well. They've got to do something to bring some of these numbers down to diversify the offense a little more than just, hey, we're going to drive and kick, or we're going to shoot early shot clock threes. That's not good for the product. And I think I think is something that everyone in the NBA will agree with.
I've got the fix, Chris. It's really obvious. You just reduce the value of a three-pointer to like 2.6. Done.
So one thing, I will tell you this, Andrew, one thing that I talked to Adam Silver about this in December. And, look, in my story, I kind of float a bunch of wild ideas. Not the 2.6. That's a pretty good one. I'm going to have to go back into the story and add that.
Yeah, please.
But like one thing that he said was like, look, we don't want to confuse our fans, right? Like they love the in-season tournament, but it's been very confusing, right? Like what games matter, what games count. Like they acknowledge that. Like they don't want to do anything that confuse the fans. One thing I had suggested in the story was like, hey, how about you put a cap on the number of threes that count as 3 per game? Like you can make 15 threes per game, say. And look, in theory, I think it makes some sense, but it does confuse the fan base. It's probably going to be looking at the board going, wait, how many threes did we take already?
15 threes and then like that.
it's just, look, there is a pretty simple fix. Like ever since the early 2000s, when hand checking was completely legislated out, they've made it really easy for guys on the perimeter to get their shots off. If you bring back some form of hand checking, if you allow guys to be a little more physical on the perimeter, that's going to open things up. Because if a guy's got a hand on him or if a guy's got a forearm on him, he's much less likely to pull up from 3. So if there's one minor rule change I would make, it's allow these perimeter defenders to be a little more physical and force these guards and wingmen to pass up threes and go to the basket a little more often.
Dude, I'm telling you, 2.6, problem solved. like seriously, throw that in there.
That is going to confuse the hell out of everybody. Let me tell you that. That's going to confuse all of them.
As a numbers guy, I know like no one would ever accept like decimal scoring. But I'm telling you, like that's the answer.
You want like 112.6 to 104.5 is what you're looking for.
I mean, that's the way it's gonna. I mean, that's the way, because the problem here is that 3-pointers are worth 50% more than 2-pointers, and so if I make 35% of my threes, it's still a fine shot, and I can get that off even if you're standing right in front of me with my hand in my face. Because
can you imagine? I mean, you're a longtime NBA fan. Like, 3-point line's been in existence since the 80s. I remember back like 20 years ago where Don Nelson was considered a whack job for the amount of threes that his team was ultimately taking. Like, we've come a long way in the last 20 years to the point where, like, if a guy pulls up for a mid-range jump shot, he's getting a talking to on that bench. I mean, we mentioned Ron Mercer early on. Ron Mercer came into the NBA like this elite mid-range shooter. Like, that kind of player has been almost completely legislated out of the NBA.
Well, this is one reason why I'm going to sound like some old school, curmudgeon or whatever. But like it used to be, to your point, like you would get yanked if you took an ill-advised shot, which is typically a 3, like that you had no business taking. The problem now is that the shooters are good enough where that crap 3 that I just threw up, even though there was a dude around me, was probably the right shot. Like James Harden step back with someone in his face. You can build a whole offense around that. Whereas in the day, it'd be like, hey, get that guy out of there. And now that it would be like if someone takes a long 2, then you'd get that guy out. And so
there was the great Antoine Walker line from when he was with Miami at that point, and somebody asked him why he shot so many threes as a power forward. His answer was because they don't allow 4s. So like that's kind of the mindset. If they ever allowed 4-point shots, you'd see a whole bunch of guys pulling up from there too.
Yeah, and what's funny, man, it's like I am a numbers guy, and when I say to my wife, it's like I think math might have broken the NBA in the sense that if you do what's optimal, you have a lot of teams jacking threes, playing like each other, and then it'll just keep on ratcheting up and up. And I will say, I miss the guys who made it work despite not having, great shooting ability. I mean, like who am I thinking as the archetypes of them? I guess you might think Dennis Rodman or someone like that, where it's like, does Rodman have a place in the league today?
Well, it's also like I want more. I miss good post play. Like you, of course, remember the was it 95 finals with the Knicks and the Rockets? Like watching. Was it 94? One of those two. Like the Hakeem versus Ewing matchup. Like I can still remember it now. I was probably 14 years old at that point. I can still remember how good that matchup was. I miss watching 2 great post players going at it. You don't have that anymore because now, I was like, for example, like we were talking about rookies a moment ago. Zach Edey, lottery pick from Memphis, spent his entire career in college playing in the paint. I think he attempted 1 3-pointer or 2 3-pointers during his entire career in college. The games I've seen of Memphis, he's out there warming up behind the 3-point line. Like if you're a big coming into today's NBA, to extend your career, to make a whole bunch of money, you've got to become a 3-point shooter. I miss the days of great low post play, and I'm not sure it's ever coming back.
Well, it would come back if you made it a 2.6 pointer, but
you're just banging that drum.
Yeah, I'm gonna bang that drum. Hey YouTube, thanks for watching. Please do hit like and subscribe and hit that bell if you want to be notified every time a new episode drops. Thank you.